So hello everyone and welcome to the Deercast. Today we are very kindly joined by Paul Hill from Corinium Rifle Range. For those of you that don't know Paul, you ought to have a quick look at his website. We were funnily enough just discussing how we ought to introduce Paul for this podcast, because Paul is a deer stalker, accredited witness, training provider of DSC1, DSC2 and various other different courses, a reloading fanatic and offers a reloading service. I think was the original range in the UK to have a dedicated driven bore facility and arranges trips overseas for clients as well on driven bore. So I think the point is really a complete fountain of knowledge. So thank you very much for joining us, Paul, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the kind words. Yeah, when it comes to rifles, there's not much we don't do, really. From taking people from never having fired a rifle all the way through to, as you said, level 2, advanced deer management courses, anything in between, we can cover it, really.
Yeah, and I think what we were hoping, because it's really topical at the moment, is to discuss a couple of bits with you, Paul, but one of them, which is sort of quite, well, you've helped me on my personal journey with, which is non-toxic ammunition. So like a complete idiot, I decided I was going to swap my lead-based bullet for exactly the same weight copper-based bullet and use exactly the same powder charge. I should add, this was a few years ago. And I think I came to see you, Paul, and said, I'm having real issues with this. It's not working. And you set me on the path. And every time I've had a problem since, you have done. And so people we've told that we've got you coming on to potentially talk about that have been really interested. So I don't know where you want to start with it, but the logical starting point might be if you have got a complete newbie coming to you and going, look, this is what I shoot. I want to transition to non-toxic. Where do I start? What would your advice be?
Okay, well, lead-free ammunition isn't new. We looked at lead-free ammunition 15 plus years ago when it was very much in its infancy. There was no requirement for it. And our own requirement for it came from lack of carcass damage or less carcass damage. We'd found coming from a deer management perspective, we were selling a lot of carcasses into the trade, butchers, game dealers, etc., and not really maximising the value of carcasses. So to us, if we could get a few quid extra out of a carcass, then that was going to be a bonus. And lead-free was suggested to us by the kind of reloading guru himself, Aftab Hamid at Reloading Solutions. I won't stop mentioning his name. He's a font of knowledge. There's nobody knows more about reloading than Aftab. Simple as that. And we went to him with a specific problem. We'd found a way of turning a fallow carcass into several hundred pounds, and now we're selling salamis. But we were losing maybe a kilo's worth of usable meat on every single carcass. When you're selling a stick of salami for around 30 quid, that's quite significant. So we went to him and broached the subject with him, and he basically said, copper, lead-free ammunition. There wasn't the kind of the issue with carcass contamination, which is the vogue with the lead ammunition at the minute. It was a case of preservation of meat. So we took his advice, and it was advice that was freely given, but it was still pretty well untested. So we were kind of feeling our way through the industry at the time. So we went with the light and fast idea. You reduce the bullet weight, make it go faster, develop the same amount of energy in the bullet, and you would get the same result. The reality was you didn't get the same result. So after 2 or 3 months, our larder records were a little bit down, maybe 20% down. And we had to take a long, hard look at why that was happening. And the facts were animals were running. They were still dying, but they were running. You still got the same trauma from the bullet, so the primary wound channel, but the secondary wound channel was just not as significant as it is with lead. Deer, being a flight response animal, were taking off like a scalded cat and maybe only going 20 or 30 meters, which in an open field scenario, it's not relevant. But if it's in thick woodland or into a forestry block, you've got maybe a long, you've got to give that animal 15, 20 minutes before you follow it up. And as a deer manager, if you're waiting around 15 to 20 minutes every single time you take a shot, or going and getting the dog to go and find that animal, which admittedly 95% of the time, in fact, probably 99% of the time, was dead, it was an issue in time. So you got less time on the ground, more time spent extracting carcasses, the worry, the hassle. Yes, we lost a few carcasses because they don't react sometimes like they do with a lead bullet. Because of that shock trauma going through the animal, you just don't get the same reaction. That's not all the time, sometimes. So there's clearly something amiss, and we weren't picking up on it. And it wasn't until we looked at our records that we sat and thought long and hard about it and began to understand what was actually happening. And it comes down to simple physics at the end of the day. The light and fast argument, it does hold water to a certain degree. But the reality is lead is a very different material to copper. Very, very different. They're miles apart on the periodic table, which means they behave very different. And if you look at the periodic table, we're going back to school physics here, but in chemistry. If you look on the periodic table, there are about 4 materials similar to lead that behave the way lead does. There's mercury, there's bismuth, there's 2 or 3 very, very radioactive ones, and there's gold. And if you're, unless you're Mr. Scaramanga off Bond, you ain't gonna be shooting gold anytime soon. Bismuth being the cost that it is, that's not a viable alternative. So the only viable alternative that was nearest to it in how it behaves was copper. But again, it doesn't behave like lead. So it's not going to deliver the same properties, as it were, that lead does. And the way that copper works is you go light, you go fast, you develop the same kinetic energy. On paper, it's sound. It's a great argument. But in reality, if a bullet enters an animal weighing 130 grains and it leaves weighing 129.5 grains, where's the energy? Still in the bullet. It automatically follows that that bullet is going to retain its velocity, its momentum. So that being part of the equation, where is the energy going? It's still in the bullet. So this is why animals are running. You're creating the same primary wound channel, but you're just not delivering the energy from the bullet. The energy is still in the bullet as it leaves the animal. So you don't get the same effect in the animal that you're going to get with lead. Hence, the animal will run. So we stopped using it at that point because we couldn't afford, but it wasn't a sustainable option for us, and we just accepted the carcass damage. We'd rather have more animals on the ground to meet cull plans than maximize the value from those animals. It was about the landowners and satisfying their needs and satisfying our own pockets at the end of the day. Now we're faced with that problem coming hard and fast. It's going to be an issue. Game dealers are shutting down all the time on lead. The reality is that we're going to be faced with a lead-free alternative at some point. What we've got to look at is maximizing the potential and the effect of those bullets. And what we've done over the last 5 years is look at the various offerings available from factory manufacturers in terms of factory loaded ammunition and bullet manufacturers, and worked with them to see what we can actually get out of it. And I suppose the sad reality is that the best way of doing it is by reloading, because you can push them that little, but you can maximize the potential of those projectiles to get the desired effect on those animals. And after recruitment of several field testers, I haven't got the time to go and do it myself. I'm too busy on the range. But what we do have here is an enormous amount of people coming to us who want to get on board and help us out. And I think we've got 12 now. It was originally 13. One of our field testers sadly passed away last year while he was stalking our ad, so a great end to his career. But they have been fundamental in providing us with the feedback we needed to go forward and deliver. And I don't give out load advice. I will never, ever give out load advice. We do it one-to-one here at the range where we can monitor it. But through the feedback we've been getting from these guys, not one of those field testers, of which there are now 12, are going back to lead. That has to say something. They're getting the results they need. Yeah, we've had some trials along the way. We've had a few problems along the way. And they've actually been to do with caliber more than anything else. And it's changed our view on caliber choice, caliber recommendations, and certainly bullet selection and bullet choice. You came on board very early, I think, and you got behind one of the brands that we are very, very fond of. It's not the most popular of bullets, purely because, and unfortunately this is the deer industry all over, the stalking industry all over, is the way the bullet looks. It doesn't look cool, it doesn't look trendy, it hasn't got fancy coloured polymer tips on there, and people shy away from it without understanding the actual complexities of using a lead-free bullet. We've now got 2 options we provide. One is the Slovenian Fox bullet, the other is the Verus projectile, Verus Precision, British made. And those guys who develop that understand the complexities of what that bullet needs to do, the terminal performance of that bullet when it starts hitting carcasses. You know, there is no such thing as the panacea, the holy grail of lead-free ammunition. But but then again, there isn't the holy grail of lead ammunition. You know, if you push polymer tips too hard, they're going to explode. They're going to become too frangible, do massive carcass damage, fragment, cause problems, jacket core separation. You know, at least with copper ammunition, there are ways around most of the problems. What we did find early on was that when you solved one problem, you found 2 or 3 other problems, and it's been a case of erasing those problems or selecting which problem you can actually live with to actually go forward and select the right product for your own requirements. And very early on, we were asking people, what are you shooting and how far away? You know, it became very almost species specific, distance specific. And unfortunately, what was happening is that information wasn't really getting heard by enough people. We had a lot of industry experts out there, the usual guys saying, oh yeah, light and fast the way to go. And people coming across these problems all the time. But these were problems we came across 15 years ago, and we solved them then. And I think we are well ahead of the game when it comes to lead-free ammunition. The downside is that the ammunition manufacturers, the factory ammunition manufacturers, are severely limited in what they can actually provide for people purely because of the proof issue. All ammunition, whether it be European, whether it be American, are governed by proof restrictions. CIP in Europe and SAMI in America. Specifications laid down to protect people, which is a great thing. But when that ultimately affects the performance of the ammunition, we've got to think outside the box, which is why we have put in, or which is why I took the decision a few years ago to put in the reloading station at the range to help people develop a round that was going to work for them. You know, yes, the velocity of the bullet is very, very important, but the pressure is also very important. Copper is not a soft, malleable material like lead, and when you ram that into a constricted chamber and rifling, you're going to get big pressure spikes, and that's what we're seeing. We're getting fouling issues. A number of manufacturers have tried to get around these by the design of the bullets. They've got pressure relief bands, Barnes, Fox. They've got those big bands in them. You've got raised ridges, driving bands on them to relieve the pressure, or to relieve the surface pressure in contact with the bore of the barrel. I hope that makes sense. All that helps, but it doesn't solve the problem, because then you get velocity issues. You know, we're turning 308s into barrel burners. You know, 130 grain bullets doing 3,100 feet per second. That ain't good for your barrel life. You know, barrel wear is going to be more considerable in that respect. And you're burning excessive powders. It's just not good. And that energy can't be delivered into the animal either. So what are you doing? So we looked at it in reverse and said, well, hang on, what's actually going on here? And then we started looking at some of the factory offerings from Germany, RWS in particular. Why were their rounds heavy for caliber when every other manufacturer was going lighter for caliber? And it all comes down to what the Germans perceive as a sporting shot. The Germans don't take long shots. They want the animal dead. The risk of wounding is a number one priority to the Germans. A close shot is great. You know, look at the way they shoot their shotguns, or they take shotgun shots. They don't agree with very high bird shooting like has become a norm in this country. They don't see a sporting shot at 70, 80 meters with 36 grams of number 4s. They want it up close and personal to guarantee the quick death of that animal, which is commendable when you think about it, and common sense. And that's why they've gone heavy for caliber with their lead-free ammunition. Their 308 rounds, they're using 165 grain bullet in. So it's not going very quick, but it's hitting it like a steam train. So it can deliver the energy. It's not whizzing through the animal. Yes, it will retain its mass, but the velocity is impeded. It's not going quick enough. So when it hits the animal, it will slow down much quicker and therefore deliver the energy. The reality is, it's common sense when you look at it. So for a starting point now, we haven't got to ask people, we don't tend to ask people now, as a priority, what are you shooting and how far away? We look at the caliber and say, what can it actually cope with? And this is where I said, I mentioned earlier on about, we've looked at caliber choice now. For the last 15 or so years since I built the range, we have recommended 308 without question. It just does everything on the tin. You know, I've shot everything from muntjac to big kudu with a 308. No problem at all. It just works. Ammunition available all over the world. Every manufacturer, rifle manufacturer, makes 308 rifles. Any shop carries a good selection of 308 ammunition. Target ammunition is cheap to practice with. It's just a brilliant do-it-all caliber, or it has been until copper comes along. When copper came along, we had to look very, very closely at what calibers were able to do. And it became very obvious very quickly that the calibers that are most suited to copper are ones that can handle long bullets, heavy for caliber bullets, and 308 isn't one of them. 270s, 7mm, 6.5, 30-06 if you want a 30 cal, all those bullets will handle heavy for caliber, longer bullets because the twist rate's involved, and those are the ones that are shining right now. So it's been a very quick learning curve for us. We knew copper was going to have problems, but with the help of our field testers, you know, and those guys, those 12 individuals have shot in excess of 1,300 animals over the last 3 or 4 years with lead-free ammunition. Yes, there have been some problems, but it's mostly been down to caliber and energy delivery rather than anything else.
And I was just going to go back because I can see Tom is itching to ask about calibers now. But I was going to take you back to meat damage that you originally were talking about. What did you actually find in the end with moving from lead to copper? Because my experience has been that I actually find more meat damage with the copper as, and granted I'm doing light for caliber, like, you know, previously lots of people were advising on. But what's your finding been from your testers on the sort of on copper ammunition, and did you ever find an answer to the problem that you were having? Yeah,
absolutely. What you've just outlined there, you've gone down the light for caliber, so 138. What caliber do you shoot, for Harry? Just for
308, 110 grain Barnes.
Whoa, yeah. So there you've got a round there that, you know, you effectively turn that into a fox shooting caliber. Now 110 grain Barnes, the TTSX probably, you know, massive hollow point underneath that plastic tip. That's been doing what, 3,250 feet per second? Possibly more. Yeah. So you've effectively turned that into a varmint caliber. Okay. Massive amount of bruising, I expect. You take the skin off the animal. Don't know what the exit wounds are like, but I would think under the entry when you have a massive amount of damage, massive amount of bruising, you know, intermuscular edema, horrendous tissue damage. Okay, throwing 1 kilo or 2 of meat away per carcass.
Have you been in his larder?
This is ridiculous.
It's classic. It's exactly what we're seeing. Yes, you may get, you know, by going so fast and so light, you may get shock trauma, but it's not shock trauma where you want it. It's shock trauma exactly where you don't want it. It's the terminal performance of the bullet that is the most important part of any round. You know, you've got to look at the round and say, what do I want to achieve with this round? Yeah, we can all, you know, I use a picture on level 1 course of a local keeper who shot a roe deer with a 58 grain Horn 80 VMAX. You know, you could see your hand in the exit wound. It was just horrific. And you're looking at the same kind of tissue damage with something light and fast. Whereas if you slow that down and go heavy for caliber, or at least the same bullet weight for caliber, so 150 grain, which is what I kind of steered Tom into, you're going to get far less bruising on the entry wound and far less bruising on the exit wound. Hopefully, if you keep your distances to a sensible level, you will get enough trauma in the animal to result in not much difference between a lead round. So ideally, you're going to get the same effect of the lead round and less trauma. That's what we found. It does involve a little bit of thought and tailoring to what you actually want to do. And there's no way around this, unfortunately. We have made some headway with a bullet design with the Verus Precision, which is a more violently expanding round, which means you can slow it down. You get massive trauma inside, you get clean entry and exit wounds, less bruising, but you've got to bring the velocities down. So you can actually download it a little bit, you know, reducing wear on your barrel, running it at sensible velocities, 2.8, maybe 2.9 if you need to push it out a little bit. And it was only that bullet coming online about 3 years ago that really changed the copper market for us, because we'd only been limited to the usual culprits, Barnes, Hornady GMX, Fox were a really good bullet and still are a very, very good bullet, but they are very much distance dependent. And you know, everybody wants the kind of the panacea of the bullet world, you know, to be able to woodland stalk at 50 meters and go on the hill and shoot, and you know, reds at 250, 300 meters. It doesn't exist. It just does not exist in copper, or should I say, it's far more difficult to find that round. And every day, not every day, that's an exaggeration, but every week we are presented with a new challenge. You know, on Ticker, for instance, has suddenly decided to supply all their rifles with a 20-inch barrel. Brilliant. You know, there are certain calibers that just don't lend themselves to short barrels. 6.5s, 7 mils, 270s, 30-06s. You need the extra barrel length. Lop 3 inches off the end of it, and you've lost, you know, potentially hundreds of feet per second in usable energy for that bullet. So that's where the hand loading comes in. And if you take a factory round that's already downloaded and lop another 150 feet per second off it, you've got a very ineffective round. So people have just got to be a little bit more conscientious and thoughtful about what they're shooting and how far away. And people have got to be honest with themselves. You know, yeah, we all want to go to Africa and shoot big stuff miles away. We all want to go on the hill and shoot stags at 250 meters. The reality is that is not your normal kind of shooting. Look at what you are doing every single day or every week, or your normal recreational shooting, and match your bullet choice and speeds to what you are doing and what you want to achieve. And that is where the real issue for me comes in, because you can't go into any gun dealer or gun shop and say, I want lead free. It's got to do this, that, and the other, because by and large, the gun dealer hasn't got enough, and this is no slur on gun dealers, but they haven't got enough experience with this ammunition or findings with it or testing with it to actually say, that's what you want, and happily put that on the shelf, on the counter in front of you. Added to which, you've got supply issues at the minute. You know, it's a case of what can you get rather than, you know, if you can get it at all sometimes. You know, I guess you guys are probably coming across the same. We've been stockpiling primers for the last 5 years because we knew what was coming. The same with bullets and powders. You know, it's been a real issue the last few years. So getting what you actually want from the shop is nigh on impossible. And this is where I feel for it. Added to which the costs. We replaced some 30-06 RWS ammunition the other day. Retail price £92 a box. For 20 minutes.
Yep. Oh my god.
Yep, that's where we're heading, and that's not going to come down anytime soon. So you know, yeah,
that's
you want
unbelievable.
to do some ammunition tests. You're going to buy yourself 4 boxes of ammunition, see which works best. You could be out of pocket for 400 quid.
£3.50 a bullet.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's happening, guys.
So
it's happening.
So that RWS stuff that you said sort of was potentially working better and going slightly heavier for caliber, is that because that's tin stuff, and so therefore no, it's not tin? No,
the RWS make two types of round. The other alternative that people looked at in lead shot back in 1999, we had the lead ban for wildfowling over wetlands. Tin. I think Lyle Vale or Whole Cartridge produced a tin, some tin shot, which was horrific. It was so ineffective, it just didn't work. But tin as a projectile, a single projectile, can work, but it's messy. Purely because it's so light, it's going so fast, it's so frangible that it's a messy round. Now, if you're just a recreational stalker taking heart-lung shots or maybe the odd neck shot, and you want the animal on the ground, brilliant. But if you are concerned about carcass damage, then tin isn't the one. So you're left with tin or copper. That is it. There's nothing in between that I'm aware of. You know, everything on the market is based around copper at the minute. So you're faced with copper.
I tried some RWS Evo Green. I think it was 139 grades in my 308.
136 and 308, yeah.
That's it. And I shot a roebuck with it. It must have been 2 years ago. And the thing dropped, and I think I only shot it about 100 odd meters, and it literally dropped on the spot. And I was like, bloody hell, I found the new bullet. And I was like, I'm done searching. Anyway, I walked over to this thing, and I have never seen a hole as big in the side of this roebuck as that. I've never ever. I felt like if I could pick it up, I would have seen like a daylight channel through it. It was something else. It was so violent.
We tried some in ballistics gel.
Yeah.
And it just dumps all the energy in about, 5 inches.
Yeah, if that.
It was unbelievable. And it just, massive
destroyed it.
kind of explosion almost.
Yeah. I mean, as a park shooting alternative, I think for park shooting, it maybe has, to some degree, I think it maybe has merit, but I'm not convinced of it. I'm really not. It's an interesting experiment by RWS, and they are pioneers when it comes to bullets. For many years, I didn't reload. There's no need, because the quality of ammunition we could get, you could be almost species specific with certain bullets. It was phenomenal. But now we don't have that luxury. We've got one material, and it's down to bullet construction and bullet design now to get the best out of the material. We've seen a couple of manufacturers make a very soft alloy copper. That's another issue we've had. And after 7 or 8 rounds, the fouling has been so heavy in the barrel that we've had primers blown out because the pressures have been built so quickly. So, for every problem we solve, we create another 1 or 2, which we've got to get around. So we're still evolving. This is not over yet. There will be manufacturers who are innovative and still come to the market. But if you look at it globally, it's such a small market that is it worth the likes of RWS or Norma pouring tens of millions of euros or dollars into a projectile that has a finite usage? And I don't think it is, honestly.
So one of the problems, potential problems you mentioned with copper is, by the sounds of things, there is the potential for burning barrels out quicker. So do you think that you are less likely to burn a barrel out quicker by having a heavier for caliber bullet than a lighter for caliber bullet, even though the bearing surface on that heavier bullet will, in theory, be bigger than the lighter bullet?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you look at barrel design, barrel manufacturer, a lot of manufacturers now. Let's take a bog standard European rifle. Let's say your Tickers, your Seikos, your mid-price everyday rifle. And I'll make no I won't shy away from the fact that I recommend 2 rifles on this range, absolutely hand on heart, because I know they won't fail me. But they're opposite ends of the spectrum. Yes, I use Blaser rifles. I have done for 15 years. I've used Blaser rifles when you couldn't give the things away. Now they're a cult status. Unless you've got a Blaser R8, a Bavarian Mountain, and a Ford Raptor, you ain't a stalker. But the other rifle I recommend is a Ticker. I've never had a bad one on the range, and those barrels are bomb-proof. The actions are bomb-proof. A good hammer forged barrel with good quality steel will outlive most stalkers. We do horrible things with rifles here. The last 308 barrel I retired, it done 60,000 rounds as a 308 R8 barrel. It still shoots a sub-inch group with the right ammunition, but it's worn. You will wear a barrel no matter what. Okay, the less pressure behind that bullet, the less heat generated, the less stress you put on that barrel, the longer it's going to live. Added to which, barrel maintenance. You hear the nonsense about, I haven't cleaned my rifle for 47 years and it still shoots the eye out of a gnat. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. I can guarantee you now it is utter nonsense. The other thing about copper is it will find a problem with your barrel. If you've got a worn barrel, copper will let you know really quickly. Because the pressure's generated. If you've got a barrel full of holes and cracks and fissures, the pressure, you've got 50,000 psi behind that bullet. It'll find a way past and through those cracks and holes and destabilize your bullet. That's what happens if you don't clean your barrel. I won't go into barrel maintenance here. It's too long a subject. But just clean your barrels, guys. Get the crap out of there, okay? And they'll last you a lot longer. But copper will find the problem with your barrel. Light and fast bullets are going to damage your barrels, okay? You've got pressure there, as I said, 50,000 psi. You've got a horrifically corrosive gas behind that bullet pushing it out. You know, you drive that at 50,000, 55,000 psi at warp speed up your barrel, you ain't gonna do it any good. It's not gonna last as long, I guarantee it. You'll strip copper off the bullet if you got, depending on the copper alloy, and you can end up with all sorts of problems then. Heavy copper fouling, as I've just alluded to. We've had primers, you know, blowing out primers after 7 or 8 rounds. You put the bore scope down the barrel, it's just orange down the barrel, you know, and you're spending an hour or two scrubbing the copper out to get back to bare metal.
Yeah. So my first question to you, I think, was if someone comes to you and says, I'm going to go copper from my lead bullet, what would your advice be? And by the sounds of things, what I've taken away from that is there's a few things in there. Firstly, potentially hand load by the sounds of things. And secondly, choose your caliber carefully. Is that fair with those sort of top 2 take homes?
Yeah. I mean, you know, let's not get into calibers here. God, we'll be here all night. Certain calibers handle copper better than others. And it is those calibers generally with a faster twist rate, which will handle heavy for caliber bullets. So let's take the 6.555, for instance, okay? We're not getting into the other kind of swear words on here, but 6.555, it's been around for 130 years or so. It's got a nice quick twist rate, 1 in 8 twist rate on average, and it can handle bullets between 110 grains and 160 grains. That's a phenomenal caliber range or weight range for a round to handle. 270, 100 grain or 110 grain to 150 grain. Again, a big caliber. Or a big bullet weight, and they're long bullets, which means they're stable bullets, and that's the issue with copper. It loses energy so fast it's going through the air. You know, it's a lighter material, it's shedding energy all the time, so it needs to retain that energy. We had one of our field testers, he loved his 308, and I couldn't get him away from the 308, so I kind of put him in kind of not sole charge, but kind of heavy involvement in the development of the 130 grain Fox round to see where we could push it to. And he coincidentally took over or entered into a syndicate on a estate I used to manage down just south of Hungerford, and he was getting some really, really weird results. He was getting some very, very long runners and some odd exit wounds. And we'll talk about bullet placement in a second, but he'd moved to a shot that I put him onto a couple of years ago, which is, well, people think it's a shoulder shot. It's not, it's a high lung shot, but it's great for copper, absolutely brilliant for copper. But he was getting deflections almost. The minute I changed him to the same bullet weight in 270, no problem at all. So it's a 130 grain bullet doing similar speed in a 270 and a 308, but because of the bullet length and the stability that bullet carried, and therefore the penetration characteristics of that bullet, the 270 flattened them, the 308 he got runners. So we knew there was an issue very, very early on. If I'd slowed him down and put him onto a 150 grain bullet, doing 2,850 feet per second, better penetration, same results.
You're
making both of us.
Yeah, there I was thinking 308 was the caliber for copper, but I've been squarely in that.
The caliber for copper is 270.
There you go. You heard it here first, everyone. You've made us both very depressed because we're both 308 shooters.
Yeah,
so
the thing is,
I think we'll just end the podcast here, Paul, and we'll just go home.
If you shoot a 270, Tom, when people ask you what caliber you shoot, you kind of put your shoulders back, puff your chest out, and just say 270. People get it. You know, it's like shooting 300 Win Mag. You know, it's a proper caliber. It's not everybody's cup of tea, and a lot of people put off by it by going to Scotland years ago, shooting the estate rifle. You know, light Parker Hale weighs about 3 pounds, a 4x32 scope on it, whacks them to hell, and they get put off by it. But put a moderator, it's no different to a 308. But the ballistics of it, any of your 7mm calibers are ballistically excellent. They really are. They just do the job. Same with your 6.5s, you know, and I'm not going to get into the 6.5 caliber debate, but any 6.5 bullet, you know, doing a reasonable velocity will perform very, very, very well. Doesn't matter what case it comes out of, it will just work. So people do have to look, I think, going forwards at calibres a little bit more specifically. You know, go back to the poor old 243. It's had a beating with the lead-free thing. 80 grain bullets not performing how they should. We've got a round now that does. You know, the Verus precision projectile works really, really well. But I wouldn't want to be going out and shooting big reds with a 70 grain, 80 grain bullet on a body shot. You know, you need to be prepared for some runners. It just can't do the damage that a lead 100 grain bullet can do. Thankfully, you know, there are talks, or I've heard very, very recently from BSC, that there are hopes. Now we're outside the REACH consultation, or the REACH kind of proposals, which is a complete ban on lead. I think we're now more governed by European legislation. So I think there's talk of this, anything 6mm and below possibly being taken out of the whole lead-free thing, which would be a great thing. It's what shooting needed. BSC have pushed very, very hard on things like this to get it back into the arena, as it were, because we're looking at air guns, we're looking at rim fires. It'd have been carnage. If we'd have lost that, it'd have been carnage to the shooting industry. So hopefully, you know, own consumption, 243, 100 grain lead, absolutely perfect. Yeah.
Very interesting. And I just moving away from calibers, you were talking about the bullets that you guys load yourselves, being, I think it's the Fox and what was the other one?
Virtus, V-I-R-T-U-S. So it's a South African guy called Vern Putter. Vern, I don't know how, I can't remember how I kind of came across him. It was probably just through the trawling of internets and what have you. But Vern understands what a bullet needs to do. I think, I can't say too much, because he's currently serving, I think. But he got some pretty big hitters involved in the bullet development, or the round development, very early on, one of which was Chris Howard, who was BDS, is now BASC. Now, you know, Chris, I'm sure, if he's listening here, he's not everybody's cup of tea. He's like, for those of you who are old enough, you might remember It Ain't Half Hot Mama series on TV many, many years ago. You wouldn't see it now, it's politically incorrect. But there's a character on there played by Windsor Davis, who was an RSM. And I think Chris could be described as Windsor Davis on a bad day. But when Chris says something, you generally sit up and listen, because he knows an awful lot, Chris. You know, he's not everybody's cup of tea, as I said, but when he speaks, you sit up and listen. And he had a big role in developing the 243 round for Virtus. And if Chris says it works, it works. There's no question about it. So that kind of piqued my interest. You know, he's an assessor for BSC, so you know he's one of my kind of associate assessors. And you know what he doesn't know about deer, you know, he probably isn't worth knowing, if I'm honest with you. I don't want to blow smoke up his backside, but he's a mine of information like that. It's hard to come by. So that got me looking at the whole Virtus thing. I spoke to Vern, and he understands what a projectile needs to do when it hits an animal. It has to slow down. It has to do damage. It has to form a primary wound channel, a secondary wound channel. And without those, you're not going to get the performance of lead. And whether you do that by the design of the bullet, so it expands, it slows down, or whether it breaks up, either or, it's got to be a good thing.
And what made you settle on that as a design of bullet that you were going to go for? Because we've seen that so many different types and you know styles of copper bullet, and you know coming out from manufacturers. What was it about that one that you thought that's the answer? As
I alluded to earlier on, up until I think it was October 3 years ago, so it's that 2020. Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's right. It was October. We were down on our annual kind of holiday down in Cornwall, and we got locked down again. That was the November lockdown, which really hit us hard. But that's when I really started getting my head into this, and that's when I became aware of Virtus. And prior to that, we had been having to ask people, what are you shooting, as in what species and how far away? Because it made that much difference. You know, I could not load you around or develop you around to work at 100 meters and 250 meters. You couldn't have both. You could have either or, but not both. It just didn't work. When Virtus came to the table, or brought their kind of product out, it became quite clear that they'd looked at that and they'd begun to understand that exact thing. You cannot have the two things together. So they developed a round that would more or less cover both. And so far, Everybody now who comes to us, I will try and put them into a Verus. Unless they're married to Fox, I will now move them or switch them or put them into a Verus projectile, because I can get more out of those rounds. I can get better terminal performance out of all those rounds than any other copper round. Any other copper round. The downside is we didn't have load data to work with. When we had the Fox bullets, we had very kindly, I'll give a mention here, Matt Wade at HPS, target rifle guys over at Newent. Matt did all the load development for the Fox factory ammunition, and he kindly shared that with me. So I had a starting point for a safe load straight away to work with Fox bullets. We could tinker and go up or down from there. It was easy. With the Vertus stuff, Vern knows a lot of guys who are not target shooters, but kind of marksmen, you know, who are not akin to, not averse taking longer shots. And the load data he gave me, you know, when I first looked, I thought, you know, why are guys shooting 1 in 8 twist 308 26-inch barrels? That's not a rifle you pick up off the shelf. And I made a few inquiries with Vern, and it became clear these guys are shooting custom rifles. Now, you shoot a custom rifle, you can do whatever you want. You know, you can have a 308 made in 1 in 8 twist. You can have a 243 made in 1 in 8 twist, and totally change the ammunition and your reloading completely, you know, to suit yourself. What I needed was data off the shelf for tickers, Sours, Remingtons, Blazers, Mausers, things that everyday stalkers are going to pick up off the shelf. So Vern very kindly said, well, kind of over to you guys, you take it from here. So we had to kind of pick up the baton, I suppose, and run with it to a degree, and that's what we did. They clearly had a projectile that was superior in terms of terminal performance. It was just a case of getting it right. And we've spent a lot of time over the last 3 years tinkering and doing exactly that. And I think now in most calibers, most rifles, you know, so you come to me with a 308 in ticker T3, no problem at all. Seiko, not a problem at all. Mauser, Seiko, Sauer, Blazer. We've got loads to cover all those, or at least good, safe, accurate starting points. We've done some stuff with Will Pocklington at Shooting Times, and you know, it was a little bit massaged, that article he did, because I knew exactly what I was going to shoot in his rifle. And you know, it was a case of, you know, make the article look a little bit more padded, but I knew exactly what I was going to shoot in that rifle. And we got a, you know, I think about 1.5 centimetre group straight off the bat. So you know, we've done the work, we've put the hard work in, so that other people don't have to. The downside for Vertus is they don't have a factory. They've tried, I think, with HPS, but a round that has to fit every rifle is never going to be the best. You know, a jack of all trades, it doesn't work in copper, unfortunately. And that's the other thing we found. You know, things are not, you can't just go and buy a box of copper ammunition and expect it to work in your rifle. And at 92 quid a box, that's a hell of a costly, you know, exercise.
I still can't believe that.
Yeah.
So what?
They're not all 92 quid a box, you know. They do vary from 60 up to 90. So, you know.
So now that you've depressed me about 308s, Paul, maybe you can make me feel slightly better. So you mentioned Fox ammunition, which in fairness was ammunition you put me onto. Why is it you think that works? What is it about that bullet that works? Is it the composition, the slightly odd design that you alluded to earlier, or yeah, what is it?
It's the odd design. It's a slightly odd design. It's a very conical bullet, which means its frontal area, it's like hitting the animal with a brick. And if you slow it down, you know, if you look at most Spitzer design bullets, they're very sleek. They're designed for distance. You know, they're very aerodynamic, high ballistic coefficients. You look at the poor old Fox there, you know, it's limping along some way behind them. But if you hit an animal with a brick, it's going to go down a lot quicker. That bullet will shed energy into the animal, or transfer energy into the animal quicker than a Spitzer design bullet. That's a fact. It's simple physics, and it does. You know, we've seen the experiments over the years. You know, you got people on YouTube shooting through kind of 5-litre water bottles and saying, oh, it's great, look, it's in the 4th bottle. Well, you know, going through 5 or 4 5-litre water bottles or 10-litre water bottles doesn't impress me. If you finished up in the first 1 or 2, then I'm impressed, because it's dumped its energy. You know, and that's where the Fox really comes in. And it's not pretty. It's a really weird looking bullet. It's got a particularly peculiar ogive on the bullet. but it works. You know, there's no taking away from the fact you've got to, at the end of the day, you have to get to the point and go, do you know what? The only thing I can do is go and shoot some stuff now. And that's the only real test. You can shoot all the ballistic gel you want, but the reality is, and all the water bottles you want, go and shoot animals. Simple as that, and see how it works. And if the results on animals work, that's got to tell you something. You know, and when you get feedback from people saying the 130 grain bullet doing 3,200 feet per second doesn't actually knock them off the feet, yet the 150 doing 2,900 knocks them off the feet, there's your answer. You know, so it is, with the Fox, it is definitely the design of the bullet. It is a little bit old-fashioned. You know, it's very much like the RWS DK, the KS bullet they do. It's old-fashioned, but you know what? They just work. And they work because the design of the bullet. You know, we've gone away from this one bullet to do everything. You know, for years, you could stick 155 grain Nosler polymer tip in a 30-06 or a 308, send it out there, 2,850 feet per second, minimal carcass damage, animal falls over, piece of cake. You can't do that with copper. You've got to be that much more specific. The Verus, I think, encompasses the performance and characteristics of the Fox and a normal lead bullet, or it's more akin to it, should I say.
Something to give a try then.
But on the other hand, you know, you've got a round there that works for you. And, you know, it's a classic saying, Tom, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
No, but you know me, Paul, I love to tinker.
Oh yeah, I get that, and you know, I see that from your social media stuff, and it's encouraging that people are out there trying these things and trying to put it across to the general stalking public, because the general stalking public, unfortunately, resort to the easy things to find. You know, they go online and on forums and what have you, where everybody's an expert, and I ain't claiming to be an expert in any way, shape, or form. We've just done the math, we've done the stuff, we've done the research, we've got people out shooting for us, bring us the kind of the data back to give us the results we're happy to share with people. Yet nobody, not one person apart from you, has said why. Nobody's asking me why. I will go toe to toe with any of the experts out there and prove them wrong. It's as simple as that. It's simple physics, you know. Go back to A-level chemistry, physics, wherever did the periodic table, and say, why is copper all the way up here and lead all the way down there? They're two totally different materials. And the number of people who actually understand in this industry are very, very, very small. And that's not from being ignorant or not doing the research. It's because people aren't putting across the facts well enough. You know, I've not had anybody go away from here with a round that we've developed who's come back and said, I'm going back to lead, or I've noticed a massive difference. Not one, not one. But we are very specific, and we will ask people, we will make a point of saying, you know, if you want me to develop you a round to go and shoot big reds at 250 meters on the hill, we need to sit down and have a real serious chat about this. Because if you're using a 308, we need to be very careful. If you're using your 270s, 6.5s, slightly easier. And I'm not knocking that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that 308 is not a fantastic caliber. You know, I have 3 on my ticket, so that tells you something. But would it be my go-to caliber of choice now for lead-free? No, it wouldn't. The reality is a lot of people have bought 308s prior to any kind of lead ban being issued or talked about. They've got used to using it. They love using it. It works for them. All of a sudden, they're faced a different set of challenges. And that's all it is. It's a different set of challenges. And it's just, you know, adapting to make it work. The sad part is, up until 3 years ago, we were kind of compartmentalized, 150 or 130, depends what you want to do. I mean, we had an instance where a guy came to us, he had a 23-inch barreled Heim, which he shot and moderated. And he wanted to get all flashy with it and moderate it. And for some bizarre reason, he decided that he was going to have 3 inches lopped off the end of the barrel. And that 3 inches he had made into the muzzle cover or the thread protector. So it still looked like a traditional rifle when he put it back together. But we took a moderator on it, 20-inch barrel. Most of his stalking is in Scotland at ranges up to 275 meters. And he wants to design a round to knock reds off the feet at 275 meters. And also one that will shoot at 100 meters. Impossible task.
So you mentioned earlier something about shot placement and it sounded as though you were going to say that shot placement with copper might be different with lead. Did I read too much into that? Or
no, you didn't. No, you read absolutely bang on there. You heard well. The standard shots on deer: heart, lung shot, head and neck. Okay. We won't go into the whole head and neck shooting thing. You know, game dealers aren't showering themselves with glory at the minute, asking or preferring headshot animals, neck shot animals. You know, with game prices as they are, and only going to get worse. We are, you know, between the between a rock and a hard place sometimes. But shot placement, body shot animals. Let's talk about body shot animals. The heart and lung shot has been the go-to shot for decades. You know, when I started shooting deer 30 odd years ago, you just didn't even contemplate shooting a deer anywhere other than the heart-lung area, body shot. The New Zealanders pioneered or started shooting animals in an area of the body some years, well, I don't know how long it was ago, but a long, long time ago, for specific reasons. In New Zealand, they often use small calibres, 22-250, over longer ranges. They're shooting long distances. And if you drop an animal in thick cover, you better make sure it doesn't get up. They're not into taking head and neck shots at longer range. So they're taking body shots. And a number of years ago, I tried this for controlling fallow at longer ranges. It's called the Hilar shot, H-I-L-A-R. And it's where you target an area called the hilum of the lung, H-I-L-U-M. I can send you some slides over if you ever wanted to see them. But it's at the top of the lungs where the lungs join they branch off from the trachea into the bronchioles, right at the top of the lung, where you'll find the bronchial lymph nodes. And that area there contains the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, and also a knot of nerves that control a lot of the organs, like the digestive system organs, the urinary tract, the reproductive tract. Those organs are controlled from nerves coming off through that kind of branch, as it were. And if you hit an animal there, it won't move. I guarantee it. It may stagger a pace or two, but it won't move. The reason I used it was to anchor an animal. People talk about shooting animals through the shoulders. Okay, as you well know, deer don't have shoulders. They have a shoulder plate, scapula. They don't have a bony joint like boar or antelope. And if you shoot an animal through the front shoulders, it can still run. You should know that you've probably done that before. You've hit it and thought, how can that animal run 50 meters with no front legs effectively? That's because you ain't destroyed anything. Simple as that. But if you go high lung shot, that animal has got nowhere to go. I guarantee it. Okay, the pulmonary artery is the second largest artery in the body after the aorta. Okay, if you whack that, you've got massive instant blood loss. You've got massive shock trauma because of the tissue damage, obviously, but you're also clattering those the nerves, and it anchors it on the spot. And I used it several years ago when we were shooting fallow at long range. You could shoot one, it would anchor it. The rest would run, but you know that animal isn't going anywhere. If you shoot it heart lung, it's going to run with its compatriots and maybe make 20, 30 meters. And all the time you're looking at a group of animals running, hoping one slows down, at which point you breathe a sigh of relief, but you've lost your opportunity for a second shot. Whereas if you anchor it straight away, you know it's going to go down. You can follow the rest, maybe get a second, third, fourth shot. And that is why I moved to a blazer and started shooting them high lung shots. And the copper is perfect for that, because the copper will do exactly the same damage as a lead bullet will at that point, and you get the same result as you will with a lead bullet.
Interesting. So if you don't mind sharing those slides with us, that would be awesome, because then if you're happy for us to, we'll stick them on the Deercast Instagram page when we release this episode, and people can see exactly what it is we're talking about. So I'm conscious we normally only keep our guests for about an hour, and we've already kept you for an hour, and we've been talking about copper ammunition. Is there anything else we ought to mention about copper before we move on to the next thing we were going to sort of talk about, was training and the importance of that within the deer industry, if I can call it that? But final chance to depress Harry and I even more about our 308s, Paul.
Right. I don't want to depress anybody about their choice of caliber and copper, because we are only just into this. Even though copper's been around for a decade and longer, you know, they've been using copper for 40 years. Barnes bullets have been around forever, you know. So let's not get too hung up about this. Just think about the changes you may have to make to your own personal circumstances more than anything else. Don't be swayed by what you can get off the shelf. Don't be swayed by what gun dealers may tell you. Certainly don't listen to all the mainstream advice. I call it kind of mainstream media for shooting. You know, your field sports stuff, your stalking directory. Don't get me wrong, there's loads of information there, good information from some really good, knowledgeable guys on there, but they're all singing the same song. And, you know, we can all be guilty of falling into the same kind of taking advice, as it were. The reality is that it's a very small area still within the deer stalking world. There's a lot of work to be done yet. Nobody's really grasped the nettle, if I'm honest with you, and stood up and said, and I will stand up on stage and say, you're wrong. No problem. I don't have any problem with that at all, because I can prove what we've done. You know, we've got the data, we've got the dead animals, we've got, you know, 15 years ago we were using this stuff. It is not new, and there is a solution out there for everybody. I guarantee it, absolutely guarantee it. And it's a solution that they probably won't recognize when they're using it in the field. You know, it's not yet. We've all read the stories. Oh, it ran 100 meters, then dropped dead in Granny's garden next door. You know, we've all had the horror stories, but the vast majority of people will not know the difference if they do a little bit of research and ask the right people. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm the right person to ask. I guarantee it. I'm saying there are some very knowledgeable people out there who understand the complexities of copper ammunition. Dig deep, find the advice, and you will find an alternative that works for you. Don't suddenly rush out and start putting variations in. Oh, my 308's no good, I need a 3860. It's not the case. You know, there are solutions for everybody out there, I guarantee it. And they're workable solutions, and solutions that you will not recognize the difference from.
So whilst you were saying that, I've just put in a variation for a 270
Good man.
on my phone. I'm just kidding. But Harry's gone for 300 wisdom. Quick question before we move on to training, and this is a very selfish question, because it is a question I've been dying to ask you, and our listeners probably aren't interested at all. Is that reloading? And you sort of answered this question for me when I asked it on Instagram, and I got some very unhelpful responses from some people, and you'll know who you are. In that I currently use Lee dies, literally the bog standard basic ones I could get, start reloading. And now that I'm doing more of it with copper ammunition, etc., is there any benefit in me looking at some upgraded dies to get better ammunition, or will it make me better ammunition, or am I just spending money on a set of dies that are going to do exactly the same thing as the bog standard Lee ones?
It's a difficult one to answer that, and the reason I say that is if you're getting the results you require from the kit you're using, then you're spending money potentially on no real kind of improvement or no real necessity. Having said that, the point of reloading for me is bullet performance. Okay, that's it. If people come to me and say, I want to start reloading, save money, forget it, ain't gonna happen. I want to get more accurate ammunition, possibly. But by the time you weigh that up and say, well, will it put more deer in the larder? Then that's the question you need to be asking. Having said that, as a counter argument, there are reasons why certain reloading manufacturers have got more championship or target championship wins to their name than others. And if you're ruling out all the margins for error with your kit, then the better you buy. And we're not talking huge amounts difference here, you know. And okay, you throw in the argument Lee. Well, a lot of people start with Lee and then upgrade, because Lee has always been regarded as the kind of the entry level stuff. I've only ever used Reading as a minimum. That's my benchmark, Reading. And that's because I was put onto that many, many years ago, decades ago. And at that time, the bench rest guys, the match shooters, there's more competitions, championships, whatever you call them, being won with Reading dies than anything else. Anything. Yeah, we've got, you know, a good friend of mine, Chris Reed, ARC Ballistics, Chris makes dies, makes dies, custom dies for people. If you want to take it to the next level, we've got a client here who shoots a caliber 33XC. You may be seen him on my social media. That's a 2 mile caliber. That's a 338 lap mag stepped up, developed by David Tubb. I shoot the smaller 6XC. That'll shoot any 6.5 Creedmoor. There you go. There's an argument straight away. Pour some petrol on the flames. No, seriously, it's a caliber that's designed to do a particular job. But Jonathan shoots the 33XC, and he's had the dies handmade by Chris, because at 2 miles, that caliber is accurate on a car door size target at 2 miles. With that kind of accuracy, that's what you need. I'm not saying a Reading die will do the same, but I just want to iron out or take out any variables. And I've seen I've seen enough broken Lee bits over the years. When you buy a powder scoop, so you just scoop it up, level it off, and tip it in your case, then it's not quite good enough for me. There's an element of accuracy that comes into my reloading, and if a slightly more expensive die, and amortize it over several thousands of rounds, it's nup and Satan around. So buy the best, in my opinion.
So I think you've sort of answered my question there, and we'll have to wait and see whether I have another couple of beers later and end up ordering some upgraded dies.
You can get it.
Okay, there you go, done. If you can say that a bit louder when my wife comes home, that'd be perfect, Paul.
Okay, you have to order them now to guarantee yourself supply later.
Thank you, Paul. I'll quote you on that later. So as a training provider, have you seen more of an uptake in people coming to you for deer stalking related courses? And do you think, if yes, do you think that's because more people want training, as in they're just more deer stalkers out there, or do you think more deer stalkers are thinking they ought to have a piece of paper behind their name?
I think it's a bit of both. When I built the range 15 or so years ago, and decided to start looking at the training side of things, and the training side of things came from, I hate this is kind of bad of me to say this, but I used to have a lot of continental stalkers who were less accurate than could have been potentially. So they'd come one year and bring a 30-06, wound a couple of muntjac, next year to bring a 7mm Rem mag or a 9.3 by 74, and just go bigger. And it was marksmanship, and that led on to one thing and another. The DSC one, really, it was around at that time. It evolved from the old woodland stalking competency certificate back in the late 80s, early 90s, which is when I did mine, into the level 1, kind of founded by the BDS, primarily the BDS, but then BASC, the NGO, etc. And at that time, we'd maybe do one course a year, and I'd wait till I'd got 5 or 6 candidates before kind of booking it and putting it all together. Now we're doing 7 or 8 courses a year, and they're all fully booked. I think it's a combination, definitely, of both people showing more interest in stalking and people wanting to learn more about it, and people realizing that going forwards, training is going to be, or having that bit of paper, should I say, is going to be more important. So I think it's a combination of things, if I'm honest with you. We've seen so many changes in training over the years, and it can only be a good thing. Obviously you get your people saying it's a money spinner. Well, I can tell you now, it ain't a money spinner. It really is not a money spinner. If people genuinely think that, they need to reassess their views on it. When I run courses for BASC, I'm one of their approved trainers, and I do my own courses. And, I won't say what I get paid by BASC, but it doesn't cover my costs. It's as simple as that. I'm better off having 3 days on the range or 4 days on the range than running a BASC course. For me, it's what I get to put back into this industry. I'm time served in this industry. I've done what I need to do in this industry. I've been the deer manager. I've been the professional stalker. I've been the recreational stalker to start with. I've done all that. And nowadays I've got a more passive role in the industry. And it's my turn to put back into the industry now. That sounds a little bit twee, but it's a fact, because if we are to generate or keep generating interest in this sport and for it to survive. And that's the key to it. If you look at the proposals put forward by DEFRA last year, they were pretty concerning. You know, we were heading down the route of Nature Scott, you know, who just lifted all the close seasons on male deer. You know, if that's their way of controlling deer numbers, then they need to sit down and think long and hard about it. And I know there are a lot of serious discussions going on about that proposal right now. But we were heading that way fast with the proposals put forward by DEFRA last year. And mandatory training was one of them. A mandatory high level of training was one of them. And that means making something compulsory. And when you make something compulsory, it's never going to go down well. You know, we've got a very robust training industry in this country, put together by DMQ, which was formed, you know, to overlook and oversee the whole training aspect. And yeah, you're going to have the people who are scathing about it, saying it's a money-making venture. But okay, well, you know, send them along to me and let them see what we have to put into it as trainers and what we are rewarded with because of that. And as an element of, you know, this is vocational. This is me putting something back into the industry to help people stay in the industry or get the best out of the industry. Because make no mistake, in 5 years' time, I can see, and it won't be through the people's expected channels. It won't be the police saying you've got to have level 1, because they can't do that. They cannot make you spend money on training. They can suggest it's a good thing and it will tick a small box for them. But it's when your insurance company says you're going out shooting deer, you need some kind of insurance behind you. And your insurance without level 1 is £500 a year. Your insurance with level 1 is £100 a year. You're going to go and get level 1. Added to that, I've never, ever, ever done a course where I haven't, or where I've had somebody come back to me and say, I didn't get anything from that course. Most people are surprised the depth of knowledge that is, or the level of knowledge in that course. And the good thing about, or to me, about having the kind of the approved sticker on my back, as it were, is that I'm overseen by BSc. I have the head of training come out every 3 years to make sure I'm up to speed and delivering that course to the best of my ability. And, you know, giving people knowledge they didn't have before. You know, every course we look forward to. We have a range of individuals on my course. It can be somebody who's never shot a deer before. It can be somebody who's been stalking for as long as I have. And those are the guys I love having on those courses, because they can add things that I may not know. I don't claim to know everything, not by a long way. Every day's a school day. I love it when we have vets and doctors on the course that can put proper knowledge, you know, technical names, things into there. And the more people we've got out shooting, the more weird stuff we're going to see. You know, I had a photo from a guy about a month ago. I got no bloody idea what it was. You know, it was a photo of a heart-lung shot deer, and the lungs were just a mass of bubbles and lesions and kind of cysts. Now, cysts, yeah, you'd think maybe a tapeworm cyst, classic tapeworm cyst inside the abdomen on the liver. It's classic. You know, it's what we teach in a level 1 course. But this was all over the lungs. I had no idea. Genuinely got no idea. But because of my contacts in the industry, I know a man who can. So I sent the photo to an orthopedic surgeon friend of mine over in Northern Ireland and a very good vet client of ours down in Dursley. The orthopedic surgeon came back and said, no idea, but it's parasitic. It has to be. It's got to be. I'm certain it is. The vet came back after 2 days and said, 99% certain that's tapeworm cysts. Never seen anything like it. But without people out there shooting more deer, we're not going to see these things, you know. And as trainers, we like to see new things. We like to be able to snaffle that slide and put it into our slideshows and say, this is tapeworm cyst. It was sent to us by a client. So the more people that get into this and more people get involved with it, the more secure our industry is. And our industry, make no mistake about it, is under pressure 24/7. You know, you've got the bloody vegan movement, the vegetarians, the lunatics, you know. You've got a disjointed industry. We've got the deer industry not talking to the venison industry, not talking to the shooting industry. You know, we're not a joined up industry at the minute, and we need that cohesion to really make this industry work, because deer need to be shot. There's no way you can get round reducing deer numbers. You know, asking them to stop mating, giving them contraceptive darts is not going to work. They need to be culled. And the only way we can get that across to the general public as acceptable isn't the right word, but a train of thought that isn't wholly obnoxious to the general public is to do it properly. And the only way you're going to do that is through training.
What a fantastic note to take away for everyone. I think collaboration, training, and potentially a huge download that I'm still struggling to sort of catch up with them in my mind about copper ammunition. Paul, you have been an absolute hero to talk to us for so long, and to have imparted and shared so much of your knowledge and expertise with us. It has been absolutely fascinating. I could have kept you here for another hour and a half, but I'm conscious you're a very busy man, and I'm sure you've got lots of other things you need to be doing.
I've got a very decent bottle of clouds and a good steak coming up. But on that note, I don't shy away from publicity. You know, the deer industry is a very harsh place. The shooting industry is a very unforgiving place. But I think podcasts like this are an essential way forward. I've noticed a lot more people engaging with me on social media since I've been a little bit more active about it. I don't like being too active about it. You know, everything we put on there has to have a story behind it. But I think we have to be, as an industry, a little bit more proactive. We're not good enough, or we're certainly not nowhere near as good enough at getting across to the general public how things have to be in the real world. And unfortunately, we're overtaken by for want of a better word, the antis. You know, I mean, we had a situation during COVID where one of our venison processors, who we supply carcasses to, his uptake was enormous through COVID, something like 500%. You know, he could not get enough deer carcasses. You know, butchers were selling out within days. It was fantastic. And we did a park cull just after COVID, after restrictions were lifted, the first park cull we could actually get on and do. And I said to him then, I said, you must have had an absolute, you know, an absolute bean feast. And he said, yeah. He said, but he said, the minute the schools went back, it stopped. And it took me a long time to process that, and I couldn't understand why. And he had to kind of fill me in on the gaps. And he said, the minute that the housewife, if I'm allowed to say housewife, the person doing the weekly shop, the minute they could go back to the supermarket after the school run, your sales plummeted. What does that tell you about our industry? What does that tell you about our nation? You know, we've been pushed to eat insects and vegetables now. The reality is we've got a sustainable, ethical solution out there that is not expensive. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face as an industry is getting it across the general public that venison is a viable, ethical, sustainable food source going forward. Anyway, I've done ranting. If you guys ever want to talk to us again, please get in touch. If you can think of any random subjects you want to get in touch about and talk about again, more than happy.
Now, there is an offer you are going to regret giving. And we've got it recorded, so you can never, ever dispute having said it, Paul. I just want to say again, on behalf of us and our listeners, thank you very, very much for so much of your time. I know it's incredibly valuable, and I'm sure our listeners will have learned a lot. For any of you out there that are looking for a range where you want to practice, I think now out to 200 meters, or is it even further now, Paul?
Yeah, we redesigned the range last year to give stalkers proper targets, life-size animal targets at 150, 200 and 250 for validation, practice going to Scotland. They're distances I think that stalkers with good kit and some practice should be able to make those shots at. It's not about hitting a 4-inch circle at that distance, it's about killing animal cleanly. So we can, yeah, I don't want to advertise on here, it's not what tonight's about. People can find us if they want to find us. We work on recommendation. Probably 75% of our business comes on word of mouth. We've established ourselves as, you know, where we need to be in the industry, and we're busy enough to to demonstrate that we must be getting something right. So, you know, over to you guys. I think things like I said earlier, I think things like this that you guys do, people can listen there. They can sit at home, nice bottle of wine, and listen to these things and get information they actually need, are vital going forward. Vital.
Thank you. Well, there you go, guys. Want to shoot out to 250 meters, need your confidence being destroyed by being told your 308's useless, go and see Paul. Corinium Rifle Range, he'll sort you out with a new 270 Blazer, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Paul.
You're welcome, mate. Okay, guys, all the best. Take care.
Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.